What's up, guys? Rick from DFS On Demand here with a preview for Week 2 in the NFL. Obviously, I'm not in the normal studio for this week, so I apologize if the sound or the audio is just a little bit different, but we'll work on that again for next week. So, an exciting first week in the NFL. I felt a little rusty making lineups, still had a pretty successful week, but there's a lot to talk about here, so I don't want to waste any more time. Let's hop right into the players for this week, and we'll start with the quarterbacks like we always do. And it's going to be really difficult to overlook Tom Brady this week. Probably not giving you any breaking news. Everyone in the world saw kind of the goose egg that he laid on Thursday night against Kansas City. He only had 267 passing yards, did not throw a touchdown. I don't need to tell you that that is very unlikely for Tom Brady to repeat again, right? Like he might never have another game in his life where he doesn't throw a touchdown pass. I mean, you know some of these streaks that these guys have had. He literally might never play another game without throwing a touchdown pass. So Brady is a guy who they're going to throw the ball all over the yard. They get this great matchup with New Orleans. Is there any team, narrative-wise, that loves vengeance more than the New England Patriots? Is there anybody that's more likely to get right than Tom Brady immediately in a great matchup? They've had the long week. They played on Thursday. The Saints playing on Monday. So the Saints with the short week, the Patriots with the long week. This is a recipe for disaster for the New Orleans Saints defense. And I think Tom Brady is absolutely going to be shredding them this week. Now, I will probably be taking a lot of the quarterbacks at the top of the range and at the bottom of the range. The middle of the range of QBs is not great for me personally. I think the next 5 guys down the list here are all valid plays. I probably rank them Aaron Rodgers first, Drew Brees second, then maybe flip a coin on the rest of those guys. But that's where the vast majority of my exposure is going to be. They're all in good matchups. They all are going to have high totals. Very likely that they all have pretty decent games. After that, I'm not thrilled with too many players from, say, Russell Wilson down to Kirk Cousins. I think that Carson Palmer is interesting just in terms of you saw what Jared Goff and the Rams did to the Indianapolis Colts, and it wasn't pretty. So Palmer, a guy who I think this is the perfect tidbit here. So there's a little analysis down here that says the fact that the Cardinals threw the ball 48 times and only ran it 18 times, when they have a guy like David Johnson and they're winning the game, is unbelievable, okay? To let Carson Palmer throw 48 times. Well, this week you might not have either of those things, okay? You might not have David Johnson and you might not have a lead. Now, the Colts are pretty bad, but the point is being that Carson Palmer's pass attempts may not be immune to anything, right? Like we might get 40, 45, 50 pass attempts no matter how this game script plays out. And if that's the case, against the Indianapolis Colts, you have to like Carson Palmer's chances. He's only $6,000. I don't think his upside is too massive, but I think compared to his peers, he's probably one of the better options. And then finally, you probably have to consider Alex Smith again. Kind of on the flip side of Tom Brady. Is Tom Brady ever going to have a dud of a game like he did on Thursday night? Alex Smith, we asked the question, is he ever going to have a game like he did on Thursday night, as good as it was? 368 yards, 4 touchdowns, just looked absolutely awesome. So both of those guys, Brady and Alex Smith, will probably come back to the norm just a little bit. They might have both had career good, career bad games, but Alex Smith at $5,700 in a game at home that he's had a long time to prepare for. Again, the long week against Philadelphia. You've got the Andy Reid. There's obviously coaching staffs that overlap there. These are two teams that probably know each other pretty well. And Ronald Darby, the Eagles cornerback, is out. Presumably for half the season. If you remember Darby, he wasn't so great last year, but in his rookie season, the 2015 season, he was one of the highest rated cornerbacks since Pro Fantasy Focus started ranking positions. Okay, he had an unbelievable 2015 season, and there was a lot of speculation he was going to be able to provide that same level of defense to the Philadelphia Eagles this year. Them losing Darby is a fairly significant hit on a team against a guy like Alex Smith, who presumably has the hot hand, has had a long week to prepare, is at home where we would like to see Alex Smith. So for only $5,700, this is a pretty good buy for me. I will be spreading out a lot of my ownership on Alex Smith, a little more than average on Carson Palmer, and then just taking a lot of the studs up top at the cornerback position. I'm a glutton for punishment, so having the opportunity to buy low on Le'Veon Bell, who now with David Johnson potentially not playing, we'll see how that news breaks out, but buying low on probably the best running back in football, and maybe not probably, he is the best running back in football, after an absolute dud in week 1 where he was very highly owned. Feels like a pretty good opportunity for you guys who are willing to take on the risk. I think LeSean McCoy, for as good of a week that he had last week, which was, I don't have the stats in front of me, I'm a little out of my element here being on the road, but 110 yards, caught 5 balls as well, which I was really impressed with. LeSean McCoy kind of flew under the radar this week, didn't he? Like even, I feel like I didn't hear that much about him on Twitter or anywhere, despite him having a pretty good game, and he's just the workhorse there in Buffalo. They're just going to continue to feed him the ball. I think that I have a couple strong opinions on some of these other guys here. So Todd Gurley going up to $6,800. You will very rarely have me rostering Todd Gurley. I think he is very much fool's gold, and this is probably worth a video of its own, where his first 4 games of last year were like the best 4 games any rookie is, or any players ever had in like their first 4 games of their career. Then he basically did nothing after that, right? And he comes out, and a stat that I read was something like in his first 16 games as a pro, his yards per carry is something like 2.1 yards per carry, which would be historically low for a guy who has played 16 career games. So he is completely dependent on volume, and he's completely dependent on touchdowns. And you can even see 19 rushes for 40 yards last week. Salvaged because he scored a touchdown and because he caught 5 passes. So that is probably unusual. Like what's Gurley's upside? Or I just don't like him being so tied to getting the ball in the end zone, which isn't going to happen every week. Touchdowns are very random. So I will very rarely roster Todd Gurley, and especially not now that his price is up to $6,800. Leonard Fournette, on the other hand, I was probably a little light on the rookie running backs. McCaffrey I had a little bit of. Fournette I had a little bit of. But I took a wait-and-see approach. And after 1 week, what I saw from Leonard Fournette is a guy who runs violently. If you have it available, go back and watch the tape. Just go back and watch his highlights. The dude is vicious. He's violent. Like, never stops churning his legs. Like, constantly going to get more yards. It was really impressive stuff. He's going to go up against Tennessee this week, which, you know, it's funny, listed as the best defense against running backs here in the DraftKings lobby, but they're still using, like, I'm pretty sure this is still last year's stats. Like, these numbers aren't right. So I wonder if that will, even after seeing how great Fournette was last week, how will that impact his ownership, just because it has that little red designation there where all the casual fans are going to look at it and say, oh, no, this must be a bad matchup, I'll avoid him. So we'll see how that plays out for the week, but I loved the way he looked for moving forward. Ajayi is a guy we talked about last week, didn't get to play because of the hurricane down in Florida. So now he gets to face the Chargers again, who are going to have to come off a short week and face a well-rested Miami team that has not played since last year. They didn't play this week, essentially coming off a bye with a guy that I was already high on. So Ajayi is definitely up on my list. I think there's a lot of guys you can't go wrong here as well. So as thin as the quarterback position is, the running back position is so great down here in the middle. I love Howard. I think Ty Montgomery is great. He's so heavily involved in that offense. Mike Gillislee found the end zone a couple times. It's probably unrealistic for him to keep that pace up, but good to see him get a lot of those carries close to the goal line. And then Christian McCaffrey, who was highly owned last week, probably was a disappointment to his owners. I think it was a little fluky. Like, Jonathan Stewart kind of takes some snaps here and there from him, kind of takes some of his productivity. I think Jonathan Stewart caught a touchdown. Like, that stuff's not going to happen. if you bought McCaffrey as a player and you bought him last week, you buy him again this week. It's a good matchup. They're at home. Like, I'm not too worried about that. I think his upside is significantly higher. And then you've got, like, here's a name you're going to see a lot this week. It's Kerwin Williams, who, if David Johnson, misses this week, presumably he's going to step in and be the #1 running back. It's one of these situations, right, where in the NFL, if you give any running back 20 or 22 carries, they have the potential to have a good game. The running back is very volume dependent. So the more touches they get, higher correlation of DraftKings points, obviously. For now, I'm probably avoiding this Arizona Cardinals situation. I think there's a couple guys that could probably emerge, and Kerwin Williams is certainly the leader in the clubhouse for that. I'm just going to, again, I'll take the wait and see approach there. I'm just not thrilled with how that whole thing is going to shake out. All right, just two more guys I'll talk about here real quick. So it's Monday night. The first game is on right now, New Orleans, Minnesota. So we have not even seen C.J. Anderson run this year. I think this price is really appealing. And C.J. Anderson is a guy for me that's a bounce back candidate. But seeing him priced at $4,700 when we haven't seen him play a game yet, I think is something we should put a pin in and see how he does tonight and then reevaluate this later. So keep an eye on C.J. Anderson. If they hand him the ball 20 times, this is going to be a really good price because you're going to get a #1 running back for under $5K, which is going to be really interesting. And then, Tarik Cohen, so kind of a breakout week last week. Again, probably don't expect that every single week. I think he got a little fortunate, he scored on kind of a weird play. But what I like to see is that they lined him up all over the place. I think he actually ran a couple plays out of the Wildcat. I think he was under center, or he handed it to Jordan Howard on that touchdown run. So I don't think it's sustainable for the Bears to have two legit running backs. But if they continue to work Cohen in the slot or in these Wildcat situations to put pressure on the defense, so I wouldn't invest too much, but for $4,100, that's a pretty good buy. All right, the wide receiver position, always fun. I don't need to talk too much about the top. Antonio Brown caught all 11 of his targets last week. Absolute stud, matchup proof. I don't really care who he's playing against. You have to have some level of exposure to him. If I'm buying Tom Brady, I have to be buying Brandon Cooks. I think he got 7 targets last week. Only caught 3 of them and still turned it into 88 yards. So you would believe that Tom Brady and Brandon Cooks are going to continue to be more efficient as the season goes on. These guys still trying to figure each other out. Tom Brady's one of the best ever, if not the best ever. They're not going to go 3 of 7 every single week. So if he gets 7, 8, 9 targets a week, you expect that he's going to have more receptions than 3. You expect he's going to be piling up the yards. This is just, again, a really good matchup. I talked about it with Brady. I don't think I need to talk about it here again. Couple of notes that I saw here. So the 2 Raiders wide receivers. Here's Amari Cooper at $8,900. Here is Michael Crabtree at $7,100. I think it's really fair. Okay? I'm so high on these Raiders receivers. I think they both can feast. I don't think you have to worry. I think these are the 2 guys that you would want to double stack. If you wanted to do something where you took Carr and you took both Oakland wide receivers, I really couldn't blame you. It's proven that he can share the wealth. Like, let's see what these stat lines were here real quick. So 13 targets for Amari Cooper, which is a massive amount. Only hauled in 5 of them, but 1 resulted in a touchdown. And then Michael Crabtree, constantly flying under the radar, catches 6 of his 7 for 83. Listen, these guys are absolute studs. I think they're priced fairly. And I think that if you're going to look for a team to double stack wide receivers, this is your best option. Jordy Nelson at $7,900 is a really good price for a guy who could be the #1 wide receiver at the end of the week. Mike Evans. Okay, so we talk about this a lot. We talk about it a lot in golf, and we'll talk about it a lot here in the NFL. And what you're going to find is the general public is so biased to recent performances, it's amazing. Like, Le'Veon Bell, 30% owned last week. He lays an egg. Let's see what his ownership is this week. You want to bet it's like 15%? Mike Evans, who just Didn't play. Didn't play last week. No fault of his own, right? Like, absolutely out of his control. Didn't play. Has a great matchup. Let's see what his ownership is. The industry just flocks to guys who had big weeks last week. So if you're trying to go against the grain, you roster guys who had bad weeks last week, who are bounce back candidates, who are coming off buys. In golf, we say it's guys who missed cuts. Like, that's the mentality because recent performance plays such a large part in people's ownership. All right, a couple quick hitters here. Larry Fitzgerald had a ton of targets, if I remember. I was watching this game. Yeah, 13 targets in that game. So we talked about Carson Palmer, how often they're throwing the football. Larry, there were times, and you know Carson Palmer loves to air it out. There were times where Carson Palmer was just like 7-step drop, chucking it up to Larry Fitzgerald in any situation. It was pretty awesome if you're a Larry Fitz owner. I think that's a pretty good price at $6,500. Through 2 quarters of this Monday Night Football game, I've been impressed with the routes that Stephon Diggs has been running. So I think that he's a valuable option in a game where that game could turn into a shootout pretty quickly. And then Randall Cobb here at 5,900, trying to figure out who the second best Packers wideout is. And again, this is a targets game. 9 of 13 last week. Here's the game that's probably got the highest total on board, Green Bay versus Atlanta. Speaking of games that could turn into a shootout. So I think that Randall Cobb is a guy that you probably want to get on before that price comes back up. All right, we'll wrap up with a couple more here. So Corey Davis at 4,100. Very solid showing in his rookie debut. 6 of 10 for 69 yards. We talked about it last week. I think his skill set is off the charts. I think that he plays for a team that is going to have to throw the ball often. And I think he's going to very quickly become Marcus Mariota's favorite receiver if he has not already. So Corey Davis is probably going to pop up here very often for me. And then with the injury to Allen Robinson, you assume that Allen Hurns would be a pretty big beneficiary of that, absorbing Allen Robinson's targets. He's only $3,900. He might essentially be a number 1 receiver this week. So that's a pretty good price tag for a guy who might see 8 to 10 targets. And then tight ends. We'll wrap up with tight ends as the Saints decide if they're going to go for this on 4th and goal. And they kicked a lame field goal, but that's okay. The tight end position, which seems weekly like it's a wasteland, continues to be. So Zach Ertz, who we talked about last week, loved Zach Ertz last week, hauls in all 8 of his targets for 93 yards, does not score a touchdown, but it is very clear that Carson Wentz trusts this guy. So just look at his last... Okay, we'll call this what? We'll go back 4 weeks of last season and last for the week 1 of the 2017 season. So just in the last 2 weeks, he's got 24 targets. If we go back, so then he had 2 and 8. So what's that? 34, and then so 47 targets in 5 weeks for a tight end who's priced $5,300 is trending upwards and clearly has some type of growing rapport with his young quarterback. Yeah, I'll take that. So Zach Ertz certainly near the top of my list. Other than that, I'm not particularly thrilled. Austin Hooper, cuts it loose for a huge, 85-yard touchdown or something like that. Again, I would just be investing in the fact that there's probably going to be a lot of opportunity because this game is going to have so many plays, so much scoring. I think Hooper's interesting, but Witten is the guy I will be investing in at the bottom here, and $3,400 is a really good price tag. So 7 of 9 for 59 yards and a touchdown on Sunday Night Football, and what I saw watching that game was a young quarterback named Dak Prescott who is very comfortable dumping the ball off to his reliable tight end named Jason Witten, and that's what they did. And Witten is able to run some of these routes against cornerbacks where they're just too small to cover him, or some of these linebackers where, believe it or not, Witten can still outrun some of them. He continues, his size continues to cause problems for those types of corners, and his hands are so good. And they look at him in the red zone. For whatever reason, Dak and Dez just have not been able to hook up over the last, I don't know how many weeks, but Dak has been high on deliveries to Dez over and over and over again, but he is just comfortably relying on Witten in those third down situations, in red zone situations, those very high value types of targets. He's looking to win, which makes me feel like, okay, he's very confident in him, and he's a lock for 7, 8, 9 targets a week, and it's just a matter of what he's going to do with them. Now, $3,400, he doesn't need to do much with them. So I will be investing in Witten probably quite a bit. It might be exclusively Ertz and Witten for me this week. All right, that's it. Hope you enjoyed. I will tweet some stuff out with some of the tools that I put together after this week is over and we get all the stats up. So follow me on Twitter. It's at DFS On Demand. If you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear them. So leave it below or tweet me. Talk to you guys soon. See ya.